The shriek was a physical thing, a solid spike of sound that drove straight into Sarah's skull and jolted her upright. 3:17 a.m. For a disoriented second, her world was just the green-white glare of the laptop screen, the dizzying columns of her Excel budget, and the words past due glowing in triumphant red. She had fallen asleep at the kitchen table again, a cold mug of coffee her only companion. The shriek came again, longer this time, a desperate electronic wail. The fire alarm, Tyler. The exhaustion, the bills, the ache in her neck. It all evaporated, replaced by a singular, primal focus. She was moving before she was fully awake, her bare feet smacking on the apartment's cheap linoleum. She burst into the tiny, dark bedroom, a single motion scooping her 6-year-old son from his bed. Tyler, limp and warm with sleep, mumbled, "Mommy? It's okay, baby, we're going outside." Her voice was a strained, false calm. She grabbed his go blanket from the floor, a tattered piece of fleece, and yanked open the apartment door. It wasn't a hallway, it was a wall, a solid, churning, orange-black wall of smoke so thick it seemed to have weight. It hit her with the force of a physical blow, an acrid chemical stink that burned her eyes and stole her breath. Oh, God. Sarah didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees, pulling Tyler under her, pressing the blanket against his small face. "Hold your breath, Ty. Crawl like a soldier. Now!" She shoved him forward, her body acting as a shield. The heat was unreal. It was coming from below, the floorboards hot against her palms and knees. The hallway was a 30-foot-long tunnel to the stairwell, and it had never felt so long. She could hear screaming from other apartments, the distant pop, pop, pop of glass breaking. She shoved Tyler down the stairs, her heart hammering a rhythm of get out, get out, get out. They tumbled out of the ground floor exit, collapsing onto the wet, cold grass of the courtyard. Sarah sucked in a ragged, glorious breath of clean, damp night air. Tyler, now wide awake, started to cough, a dry, racking sound. You're okay," Sarah chanted, rocking him, her eyes fixed on the building. It was the Oakview Apartments, a dilapidated 3-story C-class complex that was the only thing she could afford on a diner waitress's salary. And it was going up like a cardboard box. Flames were pouring from the first-floor windows. Her neighbor from 3D, Ms. Petrova, was on the lawn in a nightgown, screaming. Sarah clutched Tyler. He was safe. She was safe. They were out. She looked up. Her apartment was 3B on the top floor. The fire was bad, but it was mostly below her. Then her eyes dropped one level. Apartment 2B. A cold dread, heavier and sicker than the smoke, settled in her stomach. Mr. Hendricks. She pictured him, a quiet man in his late 50s with a graying flat top and the impossibly broad shoulders of a man who had once been a giant. He'd been in a wheelchair since before she moved in, the result, he'd told her once, of an IED in a place she couldn't pronounce. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He was a proud, quiet Army veteran who always had a crisp dollar bill for Tyler when they met at the mailboxes. He was on the second floor. The fire was on the first. The smoke was rising. He was trapped. She could hear the first faint wail of sirens in the distance. They were coming. They would be here in minutes. But the smoke was moving faster. "Please, watch him!" Sarah yelled, shoving Tyler into the arms of a stunned-looking neighbor she barely knew. "Don't let him go! Watch him!" "Sarah, no!" the neighbor shrieked. "Don't go back in there! It's suicide!" Sarah didn't listen. She was already running, her bare feet tearing at the grass. She pulled her pajama shirt up over her nose and mouth and plunged back into the inferno. The ground floor lobby was a sauna, the smoke thicker than before. She took the stairs 3 at a time, her lungs already starting to burn. The second floor hallway was a nightmare. The lights were out, and the air was a toxic, superheated soup. She found apartment 2B by feel, her hands sliding along the blistering paint of the wall. She slammed her shoulder against the door and, "Mr. Hendricks! Fire! Mr. Hendricks!" She heard a thud from inside. A weak cough. "Help! I'm on the floor." The door was locked. A deadbolt. "Get back!" she screamed, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. Adrenaline and pure terror gave her a strength she didn't know she possessed. She drew her leg back and kicked, her bare heel connecting with the wood just beside the lock. The first kick just hurt, a bone-jarring impact that sent pain shooting up to her hip. The second kick splintered the cheap wood. The third, driven by a primal, desperate roar, burst the door open. The room was full of smoke, but the fire wasn't here. Not yet. Mr. Hendricks was on the floor, halfway between his bed and his wheelchair, which was just out of his reach. He must have fallen trying to make the transfer. "I can't. My legs," he choked, his face ashen. "We're not using your legs," Sarah said, her voice a harsh rasp. She grabbed his wheelchair and tossed it, metal clattering against the wall. There was no time. "Put your arms around my neck. Hold on." He was a 200-pound man, solid muscle from the waist up. She was a 130-pound woman running on caffeine and fear. She gripped him under the armpits, her back screaming in protest. She didn't lift, she dragged. It was the most agonizing, raw-knuckled effort of her life. Her hands, already blistering, slipped on the hot linoleum. Her hair, she vaguely realized, was crackling at the ends, the smell of it singeing in her nostrils. She pulled him 1 agonizing inch at a time out of his apartment and into the hallway, which was now visibly glowing orange from the stairwell below. "You're a strong girl," Hendricks wheezed, his head lolling. "Shut up and hold on," Faraz panted. They reached the stairs. There was no way to carry him. The only way was down. "This is going to hurt," she grunted. "I'm sorry." She sat on the top step, pulled his heavy torso onto her lap, and began the agonizing, brutal descent. She bumped them down, 1 stair at a time. Thud, thud, thud. His dead weight was a crushing anchor, and the impacts sent jolts of pain through her own body. The fire was in the stairwell now, licking up the walls from the first floor. The heat was a living thing, a monster trying to swallow them whole. She shoved him out the front door, a final, desperate heave that sent them both tumbling onto the grass. She landed on top of him, a tangle of limbs and soot. She rolled off, her body one giant screaming nerve, and took her first real breath. It felt like swallowing broken glass. Behind her, the second-floor windows of the Oakview apartments, Mr. Hendricks's windows, exploded outward in a shower of flame and glass. She stared, numb, at the fire. Then she looked at the man beside her, his face covered in soot, his eyes wide with shock. She looked at her son, who was screaming her name. She was covered in soot. Her hands were bloody and her lungs felt scorched. She had saved him. The next 10 minutes were a blur of noise and flashing lights. Firefighters, big as bears in their heavy gear, materialized from the smoke. Paramedics descended on Mr. Hendricks, strapping an oxygen mask to his face and loading him onto a gurney. One of them, a young man with a tired, annoyed expression, knelt beside Sarah. "You okay, ma'am?" I think so," she coughed, the soot scraping her throat. "Did you go back in there?" "Yes." For him, he was trapped. The paramedic sighed, shining a penlight in her eyes. "You're lucky you're not dead, lady. You know the rules. You never go back in. That's what we're for." He patted her on the shoulder, a dismissive, condescending gesture. "You seem fine. Just stay out of the smoke." He was gone before she could answer, jogging back to the ambulance. The ambulance door slammed, and with a wail, it pulled away, taking Mr. Hendricks with it. Sarah was left sitting on the wet grass. A police officer, his face illuminated by the flashing reds and blues, approached her with a clipboard. He had a thick mustache and an expression of profound boredom. This was Officer Miller. "Name, ma'am?" Sarah Johnson. My son Tyler is over there." "You live here? Apartment?" 3B, up top." "And you were the one who went back in for the gentleman in 2B? "Yes. Mr. Hendricks. Is he okay?" "He's got smoke inhalation, but he's alive. So," Miller continued, his pen poised, "you forced entry into apartment 2B? The question wrong-footed her. Yes, to save him. The door was locked." Miller just wrote, "Forcible entry, got it." "She did more than that," a new voice barked. A man in a clean polo shirt and pressed khakis was striding toward them, his face a mask of fury. This was Mr. Davies, the building's owner. He lived in a nice suburb 20 miles away. She broke his door. That's destruction of property. Officer, I want her charged. Sarah stared at him, dumbfounded. I saved his life. You kicked in a $1,200 solid oak door, you mean? Davies snapped. He turned back to the cop. I want it in the report. It's in the report, sir, Miller said, his voice flat. A firefighter, his face black with soot, walked over. Sir, ma'am, this building is a total loss. I'm sorry, but we have to condemn it. You can't go back in. Sarah's stomach dropped. What? But my wallet, my phone, my son's medication. I'm sorry, ma'am, it's not safe. The roof's going to come down any minute. He looked at her with a flicker of genuine pity before his radio crackled and he turned away. The reality hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was standing on a sidewalk at 3:30 a.m. in her pajamas, which were ripped and smeared with blood and soot. Her son was wrapped in a stranger's blanket. She had no phone, no money, no car keys, no ID. She had lost everything. The next morning, the sun rose on a world that felt alien and hostile. The Red Cross had been a godsend, giving her and Tyler a voucher for 2 nights at the Safe Stay Motel across town, a place that smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. They gave her a small bag with a toothbrush, a comb, and a t-shirt that read, Charity 5K Run. She felt like a refugee. Her first priority was Mr. Hendricks. After walking Tyler to a nearby school, a 2-mile trek she made him pretend was an adventure, she used the last of her bus fare to get to St. Jude's Hospital. She walked into the sterile, air-conditioned lobby and approached the information desk. I'm here to see Mr. Hendricks. He was admitted last night for smoke inhalation. The woman at the desk didn't look up from her computer. ICU, room 312, family only. Oh, I'm not family, but I'm... Family only, the woman repeated, finally looking up. Sarah walked to the ICU, her hope thinning. A stern charge nurse, a woman with a face like a clenched fist, stood guard at the double doors. Can I help you? I'm here for Mr. Hendricks. I'm the one who pulled him out of the fire. The nurse's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. And we all thank you for your efforts. But he is stable, and he is resting. Hospital policy is family only in the ICU. You are not on his list. But I just want to see him for 1 minute. To know he's really okay. Ma'am, I have my rules, and I have a unit to run. We have his family's contact information. They are on their way. Please, you're a civilian. You need to leave. She was turned away. She stood in the hallway smelling of smoke and motel soap, feeling like a nuisance. An irrelevance. She was the hero who wasn't even allowed to see the man she'd saved. She walked back to the motel, her feet aching. She used the motel's grimy payphone to make the next call. Mel's Diner, a voice chirped. Hi, Janine, it's Sarah. Sarah, oh my God, I heard. Are you okay? Is Tyler okay? We're fine, we're safe, but Mel, listen, my apartment, it's all gone, my uniform, everything. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. Oh, Sarah, honey, I'm so sorry, but you know I'm running a business here. I need you here for the morning rush. You don't have your uniform, you don't have, well, anything. I can't have you on the floor like, well, smelling of smoke. Just give me 2 days, Mel. Just until I can get to a thrift store, get another uniform. I can't, hun. I'm short-staffed as it is. I gotta have someone reliable. I have to give your shifts to Gina. I'm so sorry. I'll write you a good reference. The click of the phone felt like a death sentence. She was, officially, unemployed. She slumped onto the lumpy motel bed. One call left. The most important one. Her renter's insurance. It was a cheap, bare-bones policy, but it was something. It was the $2,000 she was counting on for a deposit on a new apartment. She dialed the 1-800 number. After 20 minutes on hold, a man with a cold, bureaucratic voice picked up. This was adjuster R45B. Yes, Ms. Johnson, I have your file here. Policy number. He rattled off the numbers. Claim for fire at 1240 Oakview. Yes. There was a pause. A terrible clinical pause. Ah? Sarah asked, her stomach twisting. Well, Ms. Johnson, I see your policy. Unfortunately, I'm looking at the preliminary fire marshal's report. It seems the fire originated in your unit. Sarah's blood ran cold. What? That's impossible. I was at my kitchen table. The fire was below me. I smelled it from the hallway. The report here, the adjuster said, his voice devoid of any human emotion, suggests an overloaded power strip near a computer workstation. That would be your apartment. 3B. That's a lie. My computer was on a surge protector. The adjuster cut her off, his voice hardening. Worse, Ms. Johnson, your policy has a standard negligence clause. It does not cover fires started by tenant negligence. And since the preliminary report indicates you caused the fire, your claim is denied. No, please, you don't understand. We are very sorry for your loss, Ms. Johnson. Is there anything else I can help you with today? He disconnected. Sarah stared at the receiver. This wasn't happening. It was a nightmare. She had run into a burning building, dragged a man to safety, and in return, the world was calling her a liar. She wasn't just a victim. In the cold, black and white print of the system, she was the one to blame. The phone rang again, making her jump. It was the motel's front desk. Ms. Johnson? A Mr. Davies is on the line for you. He said it was an emergency. She took a shaky breath and took the call. Hello? Ms. Johnson, Mr. Davies' voice was oily and cold. I'm glad I found you. I just got off the phone with my insurance company, and the fire marshal, it's just the fire marshal. As I thought. What are you talking about? Your fire, Ms. Johnson, the one you started with your little computer setup. The one that's going to cost me $500,000. I didn't start that fire. It was faulty wiring. I've told you about the flickering lights. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, Davies snarled, cutting her off. My insurance won't cover fires started by tenant negligence. You and your little space heater, or whatever it was, cost me my building. I am suing you for the full damages, Ms. Johnson, including, by the way, the $1,200 door you so helpfully destroyed. You've ruined me, and I'm going to ruin you. He hung up. Sarah slid down the wall, the phone dropping from her hand. Unemployed, homeless, blamed for the fire, and now being sued. This was the bottom. There was nowhere else to fall. But she was wrong. She had no money. She had no job. She had a child to feed. Her 2 nights at the motel were almost up. In a state of pure adrenaline-fueled panic, she did the only thing she could think of. She took Tyler and went to the county's Child Protective Services office to ask for emergency aid. A food voucher. Help with a deposit. Anything. This is where she met Ms. Gable. The CPS office was a landscape of beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and quiet, desperate people. Ms. Gable was a stone-faced, overworked case manager whose eyes held a kind of permanent, weary pity. She looked at Sarah over the top of her wire-rimmed glasses, her pen tapping a rhythm of doom on her desk. So, let me get this straight, Miss Johnson, Ms. Gable said, looking down at her intake form. You are unemployed. I lost my job because of the fire, Sarah said, her voice shaking. I can get another one. I'm a hard worker. Ms. Gable just made a note. You are currently homeless living in a motel, I might add, that is on our list for drug and prostitution arrests. My apartment burned down. The Red Cross put us there. It's only for one more night. And, Ms. Gable continued, her voice flat, you are currently being sued for negligence, for starting the fire that rendered you homeless. And this is in addition to the police report that cites you for destruction of property. It's a lie. None of it is true. I saved a man's life. For the first time, Ms. Gable looked at Sarah with something other than bureaucratic indifference. It was a cold, tired pity, a look that chilled Sarah to the bone. "Ms. Johnson," she said, folding her hands on the desk, "let me tell you what I see. I see a mother with no home, no income, and a pending lawsuit that accuses her of child endangerment by starting a fire in her own home. You have no stable environment for this child." "No, no, you don't understand. I'm a good mom. Tyler, tell her, baby, tell her I'm a good mom." Tyler, who had been coloring quietly, looked up, his eyes wide with fear. He just buried his face in Sarah's side. "By law," Ms. Gable said, her voice softening, but her decision already made, "I cannot let him stay with you in this situation. It's not safe." "What? What are you saying?" "Tyler will be placed in temporary emergency foster care, just until you can get back on your feet. Secure a home, secure an income. We can reevaluate then." "No." The word was a raw tear in the quiet office. "No, you can't. He's all I have. He's my son." "If you fight me, Ms. Johnson," Ms. Gable said, her hand already on the phone, "I will be forced to call security and have a judge formalize it. It will be worse for you. This way, you are cooperating. It looks better on your file." Sarah's protests were useless. The rules were clear. An hour later, she was sitting alone in the sterile, white office. Her protests had turned to numb, silent sobs. She had watched her son, her world, her reason, be led away by a stranger, his small, confused face looking back at her. "Mommy." She had done the right thing. She had run into the fire. She had saved a life. And the system, the cops, the nurses, the adjusters, the landlords, and now CPS, had systematically and with cold, precise cruelty ripped her entire life apart as a reward. This was the absolute bottom. Her 2 nights at the motel were up. Ms. Gable had given her a list of women's shelters, but they were all full. "It's the end of the month," a tired voice at the 3rd shelter had told her over the phone. So Sarah was on a park bench. It was cold, a damp, clinging November chill that seeped into her bones. She was still wearing the charity 5K t-shirt. She had $14 to her name. She had no son. She had no home. She had no one. She was, in every measurable way, erased. She sat on that bench as the sun went down, the park emptying out, leaving her alone with the shadows. The rage she had felt in Ms. Gable's office was gone, burned away, leaving only a vast, empty, cold despair. She replayed the fire, over and over. What if she had stayed outside? What if she had just held Tyler and watched apartment 2B burn? Hendricks would be dead. But she would have her son. She would have her job, her cheap, run-down apartment, her life. She had been punished, not for a mistake, not for a crime. She had been punished for being good. She had been punished for an act of selfless heroism. The world, it seemed, did not reward heroes. It broke them. It took their children and left them to freeze on park benches. She huddled on the bench, pulling her knees to her chest. She had cried so much in the CPS office that she had no tears left. She was just a hollow shell. The audience of her life, the great faceless system, had watched her one good deed and decided in unison to boo her off the stage. She had done the right thing, and in return, everything she had ever loved had been stripped from her. The injustice of it was a physical weight, heavier than Mr. Hendricks had been, crushing her, suffocating her. She closed her eyes, the cold hardwood of the bench pressing into her back. For the first time, she didn't know if she had the strength to get up in the morning. Morning came, not with a sunrise, but with a gradual gray lightening of the sky. Sarah hadn't slept. She was a block of ice, a statue of despair. She got up, not because she had a plan, not because she had hope, but because, on some animal level, it was not in her to simply lie down and die. She was walking, aimlessly. Her feet, numb and aching, took her back toward a place she knew, back toward the only home she had. She turned the corner onto Oakview Street, and she stopped. The blackened skeletal shell of the apartment building was there, roped off with yellow caution tape. But that's not what made her stop. The street was full. She heard it before she saw it clearly. A low, ground-shaking, vibrating rumble. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of 100 idling engines. One Harley-Davidson, gleaming black and chrome, was parked at the corner, then another, then 5, then 20. They stretched the entire length of the block, 200 at least, a sea of denim, black leather, and chrome. The bikers sat on their machines in a perfect, silent, intimidating formation. They wore matching cuts, leather vests with a patch on the back, a screaming eagle, and the words 101st Airborne. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. They were just waiting. They killed their engines. One by one, the deep thrum, thrum, thrum died until the street was plunged into a silence that was 1,000 times more intimidating than the noise had been. Sarah stood on the corner, frozen, a small, soot-stained figure in a charity t-shirt. One of the bikers, a man built like a refrigerator with a long graying beard and a patch that read "Preacher," dismounted. He walked toward her, his boots heavy on the pavement. He didn't look mean, he looked calm. "Are you Sarah Johnson?" His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone. She could only nod. "Mr. Hendricks sends his regards," Preacher said, his eyes kind. "He just got his voice back yesterday. He's a man of few words, but he told us what you did. Took us a few days to get everyone here. Some of the brothers rode in from 3 states over." I don't understand." "Hendricks is 101st. We're his family. We don't leave our people behind. And you, ma'am, you're one of our people now." This commotion, this sudden, impossible occupation of the street, was drawing a crowd. A white sedan pulled up, and Mr. Davies, the landlord, got out, his face already turning red. "What is this? You can't be here. This is private property. I'm calling the cops." "We're already here," a voice said. Officer Miller's cruiser rolled to a stop, his lights flashing. He got out, hand on his hip, ready to throw his weight around. "All right, you all need to move these machines." "Officer," Preacher said, not raising his voice, but cutting through the noise like a blade. "We're not here for trouble. We're here for justice." As if summoned, a third car arrived, a Bland County sedan. Ms. Gable got out, her face a mask of confusion. I got a call about Miss Johnson." The villains were assembled. Davies, greed; Miller, indifference; and Gable, bureaucracy. They stood on the sidewalk, a small, petty tribunal, facing a jury of 200 silent bikers. Preacher took a step forward. He wasn't smiling. "First," he said, pointing a thick finger at Davies, "you." "I'm warning you," Davies blustered. "My friend here," Preacher said, gesturing to a biker who was improbably holding a laptop, "is a retired fire investigator. He pulled the real fire marshal's report this morning, not the preliminary one you've been waving around." The biker investigator spoke. "Fire started in the basement, Mr. Davies. Faulty wiring in the main junction box. Same wiring you were cited for 6 times in the last 3 years and failed to fix. That's your negligence, not hers." The fire traveled up the pipe chases to the other floors. Her overloaded power strip was a lie. Davies's face went from red to a pasty, sickly white. "So," Preacher continued, "you'll be dropping your lawsuit, and you'll be writing Ms. Johnson a check for her full deposit plus 3 months' rent for emotional distress. Or we'll be funding her lawsuit, and I promise you we have better lawyers than you do." Davies sputtered, speechless. Preacher turned to Officer Miller. "Second, you." Miller's hand had moved away from his hip. "Now look. You took a statement from a traumatized woman and let a slumlord bully her. You didn't investigate. You just wrote forcible entry. You didn't protect, and you didn't serve. You were lazy. We're filing a formal complaint with your captain for gross negligence, and we have 200 witnesses who will attest to your conduct right now." Miller, seeing his entire career flashing before his eyes, suddenly became very, very polite. I'll just secure the scene." He retreated to his car. Finally, Preacher turned to Ms. Gable. She was clutching her clipboard to her chest like a shield. "And you took her son." I was following procedure, Gable said, her voice high and defensive. She is homeless, unemployed. I had no choice. We've got a lawyer here, Preacher said. A biker in a perfectly tailored suit stepped forward, holding a briefcase. He looked more dangerous than all the others combined. And, Preacher continued, we have this. He pulled a thick envelope from his vest. Here is a cashier's check for $50,000 donated by the 101st Airborne Veterans Fund. And here, he handed her a letter, is a job offer for Ms. Johnson as an administrative assistant at my friend's logistics company. Full benefits, starting Monday. He took a step closer to Ms. Gable, his 6'4" frame blocking out the sun. She is no longer homeless. She is no longer unemployed. You have no legal, moral, or procedural leg to stand on. You will go back to your office. You will cut through your red tape and you will return her son now. His voice didn't need to be loud. It was a command backed by a moral force that Ms. Gable's entire rulebook could not withstand. She just nodded, pale and trembling, and fled to her car. The aftermath was a swift, satisfying collapse of the bureaucratic house of cards. Davies, terrified of a real lawsuit, was on the phone with his bank, transferring the money. Ms. Gable, it was later reported, was on the phone with her supervisor, fast-tracking Tyler's immediate return. Officer Miller just stayed in his car, writing a report that would never be read. Preacher turned back to Sarah, his face softening. He handed her the envelope with the cash and a set of keys. What is this? She whispered, her hands shaking. First and last month's rent on a new apartment. 2 blocks over. It's clean. It's safe. The furniture's already there. He pressed the keys into her palm. From the 101st. We don't leave our people behind, and we don't let our heroes fall. Sarah looked at the keys. She looked at the check. She looked at the 200 bikers who had formed a wall of protection around her, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the world was against her. She broke down, but this time, the sobs were not of despair. They were of relief. The final image was 2 hours later. Sarah stood in the doorway of her new, fully furnished apartment. It smelled of fresh paint and new carpet. Tyler was asleep on the brand-new sofa, clutching his go blanket. He was home. Mr. Hendricks was there in a new wheelchair, a blanket over his legs. He had been released from the hospital into the care of his family. He didn't say anything. He just reached out, took Sarah's hand, her hand, which was now bandaged and clean, and gave it a grateful, silent nod. Outside the window, on the street below, 200 engines roared to life one after another, a thunderous, deafening salute that rattled the glass. Sarah looked down. Preacher gave her a 2-fingered salute. She watched them go, a river of chrome and black leather, riding off into the afternoon. The street was quiet again, but it was a new kind of quiet, a quiet that felt like peace. Sarah Johnson was not just back where she started. She was safe, she was secure, and she had a new, very large, very loud, and very powerful family.